So I remember this patient like it was yesterday. She was a young woman, a pillar of her community. She ran a business that employed 20,000 people. And from all appearances, my patient, this young woman, was really headed for the stratosphere. In the beginning, there were no signs. And then you started to see slow signs of disease. And the disease took over all aspects of her life. If you could turn the slides on for me, I can't even see it. That's okay. The disease really took over all aspects of her life until it became apparent. Her disease progressed until she finally passed away. And she was 32 years of age. Next slide, please. And her name? The Enron Corporation. Once an absolute pillar of American success, leading the way with amazing results. But what was not recognized were the signs of disease. Signs of disease within the organization. There was no sign of any purpose. There was no sign of any direction. Profit above everything. And just like my patients, I've been a physician and a proud physician for 2 decades. And just like my physicians, they often say, "Doc, if it ain't broke, don't fix it." Until they finally see the signs of disease, they do nothing about it. No different for this patient. 32 years of age, could have thrived for many more decades, but failed. And so I've been a practicing physician in my journey to help folks to really realize their potential, not just their potential in their back pocket or how big their car is, or do they have a T on their car to symbolize their success, but really true success of wellness, happiness, and true health, right? That's what drives me. That's what drove me to make this show with my amazing wife, the Dr. Nandi Show. We started off in one station in Detroit with one purpose. I wanted to give people the tools it takes, the tool that they can use for their family, for themselves, for their community, to live their best life. And with that in mind, we continue to have that purposeful movement. And now we're in 95 million homes, as Teresa said, in the US, and over 200 million homes worldwide. Next slide, please. I am a physician for patients, but this is a sign of disease. The Gallup poll. 1 in 3 employees say that they have the opportunity to be their best. 2 out of 3 do not. The percentage of employees engaged in the US, 31 to 32%, abysmal, right? If you are a patient, if the US corporation, and in fact, I'll tell you most of North America, if that was a sign of disease, we're failing miserably. So I said to myself, I love the one-on-one. I've talked to Teresa, I've talked to Gary, I've talked to so many of you one-on-one. I love that. But I wanted to extend it to an even bigger platform, which is organizations. And I feel the same principles that I've really utilized the last 2 decades to help patients, you can actually use in organizational health. Next slide, please. So I want to serve as the doctor of organizations, to see disease before it happens, to empower our employees and our CEOs, the COOs, the mid-levels, all of the organizations, to give them the ability to thrive, not just for a decade or 2, but really for a lifetime of that organization. And I want to be able to use the same principles I've used with patients. Next slide, please. So I began a career in medicine at the age of 6. And you say, really? Wow, you're a 6-year-old doc. Not quite. But that is my amazing mother, who is just my hero, right? My mom just rocks it every single time. And why I put that picture is at age 6, and any of you have boys that are 6 years old or close? They get into a little bit of trouble, don't they? A little bit. So I was that kid, driving my parents absolutely insane. Every day, all the time, morning to night, nonstop, until one day I did not. And it was kind of cool for a day or two, but then it lasted 2 weeks. And then I wouldn't want to do anything. The only thing I liked, and I was in India then, was listening to cricket, which is a sport that maybe you guys have seen, but I was addicted to cricket. But that's it. Did not want to eat, didn't want to play, didn't want to go to school, lost weight, was literally slowly dying. This woman and my father were distraught. I saw no less than a dozen physicians. All were just completely baffled. So we went to alternative medicine. You know, in India, it's not called alternative medicine because it's mainstream. I was covered in garlic for an entire day. Because that was going to suck the poison out of me. Didn't work. I did other things that were just as extreme because they were really worried they were losing their son. Any of you are parents, man, you'd give up your right, your left arm, your legs if your kids are sick and you're losing them, right? And my mom is probably one of the strongest women or men that I've ever met. So finally, she insisted and told my dad that we've got to see this doctor that I've heard about, Dr. Chandrasekhar. Remember his name until today. So I was always given a treat when I went to see doctors because I was so sick of it. So I was okay, I'm good, I'll get a treat if I see this doctor. So I went and saw him. It was Christmas Eve, and I was 6 years old. Dr. Chandrasekhar saw me, and he examined me. Very tall man, very kind, like amazing, amazing presence. But he told me something that day that shocked me. Most doctors told me, sorry, I don't really know what's going on. You know, let's try something. And I would go home and I'd get a treat. That's all I was expecting. But this time he said, we have to admit your son, Mr. Nandi, to the hospital tonight. I think we're going to lose him. So I said, what is this? And I'm not getting a treat, and I'm going to the hospital. And it was Christmas Eve. I said, can we wait a couple of days? It's been going on for a while. Even mouthy at age 6, you know, questioning and telling him really what to do. And the doctor didn't agree with my plan. He said, go to the hospital. And for the next 2 weeks, I was, in my mind, was terrorized, poked, prodded. 10 people were holding me down as I was screaming because I didn't know what was going on. Didn't understand, have the capacity to understand. But what I know now is that that doctor saved my life. I was diagnosed with rheumatic fever. It had affected my heart valves. My heart was failing. My legs were swollen. I couldn't breathe. And the inflammation from this autoimmune disease called rheumatic fever took every bit of energy I had. And that's why I no longer wanted to drive my parents nuts or do anything at all. That treatment saved my life. And that treatment propelled me towards medicine. I knew that I wanted to do something like that man did to save my life. And I continue to do that 2 decades later. Next slide, please. Last year, I released this book. It's called 5 Steps to Becoming Your Own Health Hero for Longevity, Well-Being, and Joyful Life. And many of you know about that book. And in that book, to me, it's always about simplicity. If I can confuse you by saying erythema instead of red, I have not done my job, right? If I can say edematous instead of swollen, I have not done my job. My job is to make it as simple as possible because my job is to help you. I tell my patients, please don't apologize for asking me questions because you're my boss. Right? I'm here because of you, not the other way around. So in this book, I write about 5 steps. 5 steps, 5 simple steps that are achievable to really empower yourself for health. First, I think the most important is purpose. Purpose in your life. And why do I care about purpose as a doctor? People ask me, what doctor I came here for? My joints are hurting. You're talking about purpose. Is there something wrong here? Am I in the wrong office? Have you been having a bad day? What is going on? And I tell them, Mr. Jones, did you know that purpose will increase your lifespan by 7 years? Do you know that there's less than 10 studies that say that you can decrease strokes, heart attacks, you can decrease cancer, autoimmune disease by just having one simple thing, purpose. First pillar. Second pillar, and my friend Dr. Mark Hyman talks about this, is that the most powerful weapon against disease that you have is not found in your medicine cabinet, surprisingly. It's found in your fork. Your fork is the most powerful weapon you have to combat disease. Why? Because this action of what you do from your plate to your mouth and what you put in is absolutely critical in everything that you do. Whether it's succeeding in a business, running a marathon, walking up that hill, if you put the wrong stuff in there, you're done. Crap in, as my friends in Detroit say, crap out, brother. Crap out, right? You cannot put crap in and expect a jewel to come through. So, second pillar, nutrition. The third pillar, most of I practice in an office and there's a giant gym next to it. Giant gym. Where 1,000 people can work out in unison. And I have this hobby that I have. It's called vulture watching. Anybody else here watch vultures in Detroit? Nobody else. Wow, I'm the only one. So I'm in the window, and it gives me a lot of pleasure as I see these cars circling the parking lot. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, maybe 4. Why? Because I've got to find the closest parking space to the gym. Because I'm not ready to work out, brother. I'm going to work out when I step in the gym. If someone could carry me from my car straight into the gym, put me on the treadmill, and please press start. I like level 3. That is purposeful movement in America, right? Wrong. Purposeful movement is taking your kids for a walk. It's walking your dog. Talking to Gary as you're walking in Costa Rica. That is purposeful movement. As we talk about how he's empowering the planet. Talking to Teresa about EMF as you're doing something. Purposeful movement. That is what has been shown to increase longevity. That's why this place is one of the blue zones. Ain't nobody taking 500 pounds, putting it up on their head, grunting, looking around to see if there's someone of the opposite sex looking, and then dropping that weight to make that loud sound. Very few people in Costa Rica do that. But amazingly, they've increased longevity. Purposeful movement, the third pillar. The fourth pillar, one of my favorite things that I do every single day is talk to my kids and talk to my amazing wife. And I talk to them about the biggest weapon you have in achieving everything is above your neck, right? Above your neck. Not below, no matter what Instagram says to you, it's really not below your neck, right? No matter what Kim Kardashian says, it's not below your waist. It is above your neck. And when you cultivate the mind, you're powerful. You are powerful. And why as a physician do I care about that? Because every disease state, every treatment is increased exponentially if you cultivate the mind. And people come to me and say, Doctor, I am a construction worker and I'm 250 pounds. I'm 6'3". I am not going on top of a mountain, going cross-legged and saying, oh, brother, I'm not doing it. Not doing it. I said, well, do you like to pray? Sure. I said, do you ever like to take a walk in the garden? They go, sure. Cultivating your mind. Find your way. It doesn't have to be some class you take that costs $500 plus shipping and handling, right? It doesn't have to be a yoga pose that you can only imagine or dream that you have to be. Fourth pillar, cultivation of the mind. The fifth one is really what made sure that I was alive today? Your tribe. My family, as I was near death, they didn't give up. They could have and said, listen, we've gone to a dozen doctors, we've done our thing, and we've done everything, it's just God's will, or whatever you could say, right? They didn't give up on me. My tribe rallies around me. And tribes all over the world rally around each other. The human species has survived only because we work together and not in isolation, right? Even in Long Island, they work together, right? The tribes in Long Island, they pick that stuff off the back of the truck, put it back in, and let's go, right? They tell each other, where'd you get your hair done? And then they go get their hair done over there and they talk in the parlors, right? So they then, yeah.
We already have common friends, you and I.
He's coming to get me. So the tribe is so important. And why, as a healthcare provider, do I care? Because tribes have saved lives. The biggest example is the Rossetto effect. In the 1950s, when heart disease was a way of life in the United States, a little pocket of Italian immigrants in Pennsylvania was discovered by a cardiologist who was in a conference in the city next to it. And what he found was that nobody under the age of 60 ever gets a heart attack. In fact, nobody, unless in their 80s, actually was dying. He could not believe it. He said, there's got to be something weird here. It's a fluke. But all the data panned out. And the only difference that Italian immigrant group that had over everybody else was one thing: tribe. They ate together. They cooked together. They played together. They lived together. If you walk here on Sunday, guess what you see? You see a kid, a mother, a father, an abuela, right? And an abuelo, right? Grandparents. They all come together. Am I surprised this is one of the blue zones where people live longer? Absolutely not. Because that tribe is rock solid. Those 5 principles is how I treat my patients. And that's how we can also treat organizations. Organizations and their health can be embodied by those same 5 principles. And we can really break the challenges that face corporate America and corporations around the world. Next slide, please. So let's talk about purpose and how it affects your organization. Next slide. Anybody recognize this gentleman? So this is the CEO of CVS Corporation. So many of us who are in healthcare don't view pharmacies as our ally, right? So this gentleman, he said, I really value profit because I'm in a for-profit system. I have to make sure my shareholders are satisfied. So I've got to be able to have the bottom line. But there was something that was deeply troubling for him. CVS sold cigarettes. And they didn't make a couple of million, $2 billion in profit from cigarette sales. Ricardo said, listen, I cannot justify selling cigarettes. The founding members of CVS said, we are here to help people obtain the best health that they can. Cigarettes to him, not an option. Next slide. So here he was, a responsible CEO, all these cigarettes behind the counters, and he had the responsibility for the shareholders. But he said, and we often face this in our organizations, do the right thing or do the easy thing. Do the difficult thing that is the thing that'll take you there, or do what's right in front of you. And he said, guess what? I am going to do the hard thing. And what do you think the shareholders said? Horrible. This guy's horrible. Get him out. Weak. Not strong-minded. He said, he held his ground, said, this is not consistent with our mission statement. Next slide. So hopefully you can see this. Initially, the stock dropped a significant amount the first year. But the next year, stock went from $71 to $112 per share. And the increased value in the company, $35 billion. So we're not talking about a theoretical issue where we talk about purpose and we go with what we're believing, but rather this can actually lead to financial success. And to me, what's more important, 95 million less cigarettes sold when they did this in 2014. And then guess what? Every other pharmacy said, we've got to start doing the same thing. Stuck by his roots and talked about purpose before profit. But guess what? And we were talking about this, Roger and I were talking about this yesterday. When you make purpose your actual goal, guess what happens? Profit is a consequence. If you make profit your goal, often purpose is not your consequence. It's amazing how that works. If you use that fundamental principle like he did, this is what happens. Next slide. Amazing guy. Photographer, traveled to 35 countries. Photojournalist. Went to every single hotel, from the dives in Manila to 5 stars and every place imaginable. And he said, I want to do something exciting. If you had to stay in a Marriott or a Sheraton or this hotel, where every single piece of the hotel helps people. If you get the Wi-Fi, the fees from the Wi-Fi helps human trafficking. If you get the coffee helps the source of the folks that are there. Every single piece of that hotel helps people and their goals of surviving and subsisting. So he used his purpose to create a space that all of us would use. And in that, he achieved his purpose and made an economic proposition. And so we can do the same in our organizations, right? We can be innovative and say, what are we doing in our organizations that really can be consistent with our purpose? I mean, we talk about this all the time, right, Gary? How can you live your purpose and then have that be your business? And that's what he did. Next slide. Way before the Me Too movement, this company, anybody heard of a Heineken? Anybody had a Heineken? Some people not, right? Well, you have. Yeah, some people love Heineken. So what Heineken did was they found out how many women around the world and in Mexico were being abused. And they took a stand. This video might be useful. If you could click on the top, Control Alt and Enter, and the YouTube may work. You wouldn't expect a beer company to be interested in domestic violence. But yet, they take a stand and they say, this is our purpose. Our purpose-driven lives as a corporation. And guess what happened? Their sales skyrocketed. Women loved the fact that they were actually standing up for them. And men bought the beer because if any of you have gone to Mexico, women are revered. I mean, they're respected. And the men bought the beer as a show of respect and faith for their loved one, their women, right? And so, boom, Tecate, not your usual suspect for having purposeful living, purposeful organization, but yet they did the right thing and they profited. Again. Next slide. Same company. Nuestras marcas. I believe this is our labels, correct? Yeah. So our labels. So they said, you know, we have so many of these brands. A guy who was sweeping the floor one day realized that more than 3/4 of the waste that they create was from these labels. So he had an idea. He told the executive team, how about if we sell these labels to other brands, other businesses that needed it? They loved the idea. Loved the idea, and now they make $3 million a year on basically selling these labels and decreasing their waste. Again, purpose-driven, leading to what? Leading to increased business and also living what you believe is the right thing to do. Creating less waste. We talk about it, but here's a company who really doesn't have to do anything about it, right? Doesn't have to do anything. They're profitable, but when living their purpose, they actually make a difference. Next slide. Nutrition. So as I talked about, in human beings, nutrition is a no-brainer, right? What we had for breakfast, if we have bacon and eggs every single day, something magical will happen to your heart, right? The arteries get clogged up. If you're diabetic, then the diabetes really is not in control. Your inflammation goes up. Same thing with a company. Next slide, please. So this gentleman is a businessman from Brazil. He had a company that made washing machines since 1951. Pretty sexy, right? Washing machine company, and they're doing moderately well. Then he noticed that his company stagnated. They had the whole top-down mentality, meaning you're in charge, I have no input, and that's all there was. So he did something revolutionary. He said, I'm changing everything. No more titles. No hierarchy. Everybody helps and does things together. He did something else that was important. He sent people all over the world, spend millions of dollars in having them leave Brazil and learn techniques. He gave them nutrition, organizational nutrition, input from all over the world, an environment where they can thrive and nurture. And the results. Next slide, please. So this is the company when Brazil was at a 10-year recession. They doubled their profits. Employee turnover was an all-time low. And what did he do? Improve the nutrition of an organization. When you're stagnant in your group, in your company, and things are not moving well, when you shake things up and you change the nutrition that you give, right? The education you give to your employees, to your leadership, magical things happen. In Brazil, in a recession, changed the entire paradigm. And he did it with courage. That's the thing. The theme with all of this is that you can't do it and expect the result to be overnight. Nutrition. Next slide. So I give you, anybody recognize what this thing is on the screen? None of you eat it, but have you heard about this? Chicken fingers. Yes, somebody here is eating a chicken finger. Anybody else eating a chicken finger in their life? Thank you, Therese. I knew. So chicken finger challenge. So what I mean by that is that, listen, if you're eating chicken fingers every day, you ain't going to change overnight, right? You're not going to be able to change your patterns overnight. When you change the nutrition of your corporation, 3-month plan, 2 to 3 items that you're going to change in your company. Not overnight. You don't have to be the Brazilian company who spends $5.5 million a year in sending people to educate them. That's not your plan, right? But take the chicken finger challenge. In the next 3 months, make 2 to 3 changes in nutrition for your company. Change the inputs that they're having, right? It may even mean changing the environment where they eat their lunch. In my office, my practice of 150 people, changing where they had lunch made an immense change in their attitude, productivity, and how they view their job. So small changes, big results. Ain't none of this rocket science, but the results are. Next slide. So in medieval times, where is this? Does this look like, I think it looks like Detroit. It's not Detroit? Isn't this Detroit, sir? You've been to Detroit. That's what I thought. The Penobscot. Right here, the Penobscot building. People don't agree with me? They think it's a different city? What is this? And so you know, in times before people, in times, God, in times before, you know, artists and creative people went to amazing places like this to really get the best that they could, right? Next slide. This is where we go now. Amazing, right? Does this look familiar? Right? And so how do you then get the creativity, get the most out of your company and your employees? Not in this. And that is what's really wrong with a lot of our corporations. The nutritional input here, the physical input, the sensory deprivation is amazing. Next slide. Then there's this, the boatsters. These guys said, we are literally going to change where we do business. We don't like those cubicles, so their business is peer-to-peer yacht rentals. So what they do is their employees, guess where they work? On a yacht. You think there would be an application for that one? 100 to 1. 100 applicants to 1 that's accepted. Next slide. Here's the employee. And guess what? When you've got happy employees that are saying that I'm a 1 in 100, this is being taped, but I'll say I'm a badass, right? And then I'm going to help my employee and my customers. Look at these guys. You know, you're doing business off the coast of Spain. Now you could be in the Detroit River and be just as fun, but just saying, in the off chance you don't love the Detroit River, you may want to come here. Change your nutritional input, devastating results. Employee turnover, non-existent. Only time they leave is if they have to move, and then they try to stay. Profits, incredible. Nutritional input, just like with human beings, right? You stop your bacon and eggs, you have one of those papayas or one of those vegetables or fruits I've never heard of, but it tastes really good, sisa or casa or cas. You eat those, changes your paradigm. Your body flourishes. Change the nutritional input in an organization, the organization flourishes. Next slide. What about movement? We talked about movement and how that's important. What I'll tell you is that I'm a gastroenterologist, and movement and purposeful movement helps people in their inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. So people understand that, well, if you move, you'll be less obese, your heart disease goes down, cardiovascular disease, you get less strokes. But even diseases like autoimmune disease go way down when you have movement. Not just any movement, but purposeful movement. What about organizations? Next slide. CIBC. You guys love them. Maybe. Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, they're huge in Canada.
They're huge in Canada and huge around the world. What they said was, you know, we want to be where people are, right? We want to move to make sure that our business is profitable. Next slide. So they made the first drive or ski-through ATM. Ski-through ATM. Some dude on his skis taking out money, right? So they said, we're not going to just say we want to be the bank to be where you are in your life. They moved and they actually went to the customers, changed the paradigm. When you see, if you have no other choices, the banking industry is incredibly, incredibly competitive, right? Every corner there's one. But if you move yourself to where the customer is, changes the game. Next slide. IBM. This is what people think about IBM, right? Staunch, old school company, never changing, no movement. They're on the couch, metaphorically, people think. But the new IBM is very different. Next slide. This is the new IBM. Insist on their leadership doing nonprofit work around the world every year. How much do you think they spend sending their top leaders? All of us are in organizations. If your best person left for a week. I can handle it. 2 weeks. Heart starts beating a little fast. Let's say Pam just took off for a couple weeks and said, Arrivederci. So Teresa, what would happen? You'd say, That's right. All of us would cry. And so we fear that. What IBM does, take their top people and says, get out of town. We insist on it. We mandate it. Right? $50 million a year. They're spending on sending their top people all around the world. Why? Movement. That movement leads to fresh ideas, understanding different organizations, right? And I always tell my patients, you can't do better if you don't know better, right? And sometimes if you stay in your geographic areas with your people that say, yeah, Partha, that is a great idea. Yeah, that is awesome. Never change. Move around the world. Changes your paradigm, changes your perspective. And these people look like they're having a good time. They even look like they have purpose, right? Change the movement, change how your organization works, and make sure that you're willing to take the risks. Again, it doesn't have to be $50 million like IBM. It can be small changes. Next slide. Can you go one before? Or just the arrow down, perhaps? Up, yeah, sorry. The opposite of what I said. So, anybody recognize this gentleman? Can't see it? Moses!
No wonder.
Charlton Heston, right? Let my people go. Free, yes. Next slide. Hopefully you can read this. And so, founder of Patagonia, Yvonne Chouinard says, let my people go surfing. So next slide. So what the Patagonia folks do, they spend their hour surfing. They have a scheduled bike trek during their lunch hour. People go on walks. They literally talk about movement within their company. And so that's great. Great, Dr. Nandi, but what does it have to do with what they make? Amazingly, they make $600 million doing that. They've doubled their profits doing that. Employee retention, 99.7%. Who wouldn't want that, right? So let my people go surfing actually works. Movement, literally movement, in your company, in your corporations. And you've seen multiple examples of that. And ideas that metaphorically take you for that movement can change an organization's culture and change its success. Next slide. Cultivating the mind. We've touched upon this in human beings. So, drug addiction, opioid addiction, for those of you who don't live in the US, every 3 weeks, the same number of people that died in 9/11 die every 3 weeks in the United States from opioid overdoses. Every single month, every single year in the United States. But what we do know this, if you just practice meditation, beginning level meditation, your need for opioids decreases by 50%. Beginning level. We're not talking about standing on top of that mountain, arms, legs crossed, chanting away. You can do that if you want. Beginning level. As you get to be an expert, 75 to 80% of those folks can actually, guess what? Get off the drugs. Change the paradigm, right? In treatment of medicine, instead of saying, can I have one more drug, doctor? Say, can I have one less drug? And one more technique that your body has to heal itself. Cultivate the mind. You can take the same principle and apply it to corporations. Next slide. Normal day, here's the FBI coming into an office. They're raiding an office where you have groups of hackers that have been trying to infiltrate hospitals, to steal data, steal money. So they're raiding this office to find out how they can stop these folks. Next slide. However, this raid has real FBI officers that are off duty, that are coming in to simulate an actual raid. But this is the cyber war games. Sponsored by Symantec, leading what? Computer technology to protect yourselves from hacks and attacks. What they do is they have thousands of engineers, computer software engineers, who compete to participate in the cyber war games. Next slide. And here they are. Deception, thievery, anything they can to hack in. One team protects, one team hacks. And they actually have FBI agents come in. And why this whole elaborate system? Because they believe that their mission is to protect the customer from such an attack. Instead of theoretically talking about this, they actually participate in actual hacking games. And what they have done, by doing this, they've attracted the best of the best, number one, in the industry. Cultivate the mind, increase the input up here, and changes will happen. Next slide. So George Mumford, this is one of my heroes. Why is that? He has not ever won an NCAA title. He's not ever won the Tour de France. He doesn't even play sports very well. But this gentleman is probably responsible for 15 NBA titles or more. How, you ask? Anybody here ever heard of Michael Jordan? Was he a golfer? Is he a golfer? He tries. Is he a golfer? What else? What does he do? Anybody know? Basketball player. Yes, conceivably the best basketball player that ever played the game. Michael Jordan, in his rookie year, scoring 30, 40, 50 points a game, and he's like, I'm Michael Jordan. I'm the best. Michael Jordan doesn't get past the first round of the playoffs. He says, I just need people around me. I need more people around me. So they give him more people. What happens? Doesn't get past the second round of the playoffs. He says, this is something wrong here. The people around me are not doing well. His coach then changed to Phil Jackson. Phil said, Michael, here's a book. He said, what does that have to do with I'm a basketball player? Give me a book. He says, yes, just read the book. He said, ignores it. The next year, when they fail, picks up the book. And then they bring in this gentleman. Teaches mindfulness. And what happens to Michael after that? Wins 1 championship, 2 championships, 3 championships. Retires. Comes back and wins 3 more. Mindfulness. 2 other players you may have heard of. Kobe Bryant. Same story. Ignored the advice. Mr. Mumford came in, said, can you please sit on the floor and decrease your thoughts? He was, what? I'm a basketball player. I just need people around me. Same story. Shaquille O'Neal. Same story. Mr. Mumford took mindfulness. And none of us here weren't trying to win NBA titles. But we're all trying to do one thing. Be the best we can at what we do. Whether it's helping kids in Central America or taking the best and the brightest minds around the world and coming together. We all want to do our best, right? And so what this does changes the equation for all of us, not just Michael. I mean, Michael is an incredibly talented person, but if you talk to him, if you talk to Kobe Bryant, the single most important thing that's happened in their lives was this, cultivating their mind. Next slide. So this gentleman will tell you that, Kobe Bryant will tell you that, and even Shaquille will tell you that. Next slide. So with that in mind, I would like all of you to think about doing a 5-minute sprint. Not right now, but just when you get home, when you're in your comfortable space. What does that mean? Instead of checking Facebook, Instagram, sports news, CNBC, whatever it is you check in the morning with that amazing thing that literally is an extension of our bodies, spend 5 minutes just breathing, right? And we talked about this yesterday, just breathing. And simple as this, you don't have to take a course. If you want to, you can. But just breathe consciously count from 10 backwards to 1. Do that for 5 minutes. You will be amazed at the results over time. The first time you may not be able to, but after a few days of doing it every day, just set your clock about 10 minutes before and do it. The 5-minute sprint. Just leave your phone or your computer for 5 minutes and do this. It'll mean amazing things. What we now know is that cortisol is decreased when you do that. And why do we care about cortisol? It's a mediator for inflammation. And the source of all disease, no matter what they tell you in that infomercial, is that it is inflammation. Inflammation is a source. If you decrease cortisol, if you decrease epinephrine, almost every disease state will be decreased. By itself, it may not be the only thing, but it'll make a significant difference. Next slide. The last, and to me, in some cases, the most important part of this is the tribe. And that's why we're all here, right? We're stronger together. So as a tribe, I love when patients say that my sister, mother, brother, friend, neighbor is doing something with me. If you're diabetic and your friend or your sister or somebody else is doing the nutrition plan, the movement plan, they're doing everything together, I know that their chances of success are significantly higher. Why is that? Because as a tribe, you support each other, right? We support each other, but also we can count on each other. And when you fail, you don't just fail for yourself, right? You fail for others. That is a big responsibility, and that helps all of us stay accountable. In organizations, next slide. What happens? Anybody ever had a Schwinn when they grew up? Yeah. Schwinn, right? Love my Schwinn. They were an amazing company. From the 1950s to the 1980s, every kid had a Schwinn and they loved it. They changed the paradigm in bikes. What did they do? Before that, you had to go to Sears or Walmart, or I think it was called Walmart. Woolworth, thank you. Before my time. So Sears or Woolworth, and so they would actually have to go to these retailers. What they did was said, we're going to send it to an independent retailer and have them sell the bikes. More than that, we're going to actually give them a lot of profit, which is unheard of back then. And we're going to modernize our factories. And we're going to have superb wages for our employees. And guess what happened? They were at the top of the market. Then something happened in the 80s. Schwinn said, you got to keep some of this profit, giving too much away. We're going to take away from the independent retailers. We're not going to spend as much in our factories, and we're not going to pay our employees as much. Result, 1992, after being sold and bought several times, bankruptcy. Bankruptcy, important updates are pending as well. Pick a time, or later, right? Oh, yeah, thank you. So Schwinn failed. And what did they do? They deserted their tribe that helped them thrive in a competitive environment. Then what people did? They took over what they left off. And they thrived, and they then succeeded where Schwinn did not. So it's not just about gaining more success, but rather you can lose the success you have if you leave your roots. And the roots often mean your tribe. We talked about the VA, right? The veterans. To me, the veterans are such an amazing tribe. They've helped our nation have the best military, right? I mean, have the best that we can do to protecting ourselves and our country. Yet what do? We abandon our tribe. We abandon those veterans every single day, and the entire system collapses. We've forgotten what it's all about, as they did. The VA was in shambles because of that. Same with Schwinn. When you take an individual, an organism, right, such as a human, we're composed of trillions of cells, right? Organization made up of people. And each person's so important, right? If a few cells in my kidney stop working, my entire body is out of whack. Why do you need dialysis? Because that one part of your body is gone. Liver is the same way. Heart, my esophagus, my colon, it goes everywhere. Same thing. Every single individual in an organization is critical. And as a tribe, if you work together, you can be in concert. If not, it can be devastating. Next slide. This gentleman, he was on the executive team for Microsoft. Loved the success, but hated the top-down mentality. Didn't feel like there was a team effort. Felt like people were giving him direction, and that's it, and that's all. So he said, you know what, I'm done with this, and he left the company. And what he said was, I'm going to make a company without any titles or any roles. So imagine a company where all your employees could come in, and on that day they decide, or that week, what they're going to do for the week. Right? And guess what? And how you got paid is determined by your group of employees. If you are doing a great job, they'll say, great, you get a bonus. Slack off, guess what? You are not getting paid as well that month. That is the system he set up. And he wanted to make sure that the tribe mentality was so emphasized. And the name of the company, next slide. Valve, a gaming company that basically took over the market. Look at this floor plan. Everything is wide open. You know, you're not better than me. You don't do more than me. We're all together. Next slide. And with that, Gabe Newell, $5.5 billion net worth. So when he embodied the tribe for his employees, guess what happened? He was part of that tribe. Real-time net worth, February 2018. Not too bad. Money's not the only thing, but he can do a lot of good with this as well. And his employees are thriving. Next slide. So we talked about 5 steps and how we can use each of them. To me, each step is powerful. For my patients, I tell them, listen, you know what, if you ask my kid, what is my favorite superhero? They only have one answer. And it ain't Superman. It ain't Spider-Man. It ain't anybody but one dude. That's Batman. And why? Because really, Batman has no superpowers, right? He's got those fancy things in his belt, super cool car that he has tons of because they keep getting wrecked, helicopters. He has amazing tools that make him a superhero. So my kids know when you have those tools, and I gave 5 of them, you become a health hero. You become that powerful. Each of those elements by themselves are enough to change the game. When you put them together, you are incredibly powerful. That's what Wegmans did. So Wegmans, grocery store, founded in 1916 by 2 brothers with no experience in business, in the fist-fighting, cutthroat business of groceries, right? To be successful in groceries, you think that it was as bad or as hard as winning the lotto. Try twice as hard. They didn't have Amazon back then, but they have plenty of competition. So what did Wegmans do? They said, our purpose is to give fresh, amazing food in an amazing environment for our customers. We will stand by that and make sure the experience is amazing. Next slide, please. As you go in the store, it's like, wow, woo. I mean, I go to my store, I don't know, this thing is on the floor, that thing's out of whack, everything is not as beautiful as this. So they made sure they have purpose. Second, nutrition. Their employees get hot cocoa in the winter for free. Can you imagine that? You're in New York City, perhaps in Long Island, and you're freezing your buttocks off. Here's some hot coffee. But also, the employee places are unbelievable. $4.5 million a year in giving them the ability to get great nutrition. You are amazingly well trained. People love you because you know more about an avocado than an avocado does. I mean, they're just amazing, right? So nutrition. Movement. They took their stores anywhere they could, even to New York City, where it was very difficult. Rent was high, but they said, we have to take our stores where the people are. So movement. And cultivating the mind, oh my gosh, they send their wine people to the best vineyards around the world. So they are connoisseurs. They send their cheese people all around the world. They create an environment where it's a cult-like following. The customers just love them. And then the tribe, right? the tribe, their employees are the lowest retention of anywhere. Number 2 place in the planet to work. In the grocery business, only to Google. And number 1 for shopper experience, beating Trader Joe's by a tremendous margin. Why? 5 principles. And they stick by it, and they have been incredibly successful. So when you use this for your organizations, you can really make a change. And I empower you, when you go back to your offices or to your homes, make one change. Immediately make one change. To me, the easiest one is to, if you're not doing it, something to cultivate the mind, like meditating, even if it's 5 minutes a day. Even if I'm traveling, I try to do at least 5 or 10 minutes a day. And it will make a big difference. I've given you some tools for your organization. I really believe all of us want the same thing, right? We want the best for our families, for our children, for our employees, for our communities. And using these 5 principles really makes you powerful. And I believe that it's not just the fact that we have the tools, it's our responsibility, it's our calling to do that. And that's Doctor's Orders. Thank you so much.